The palace of the Solarian Empire stood as it always had, silent, vast, and filled with the weight of countless centuries. Its golden spires stretched high into the atmosphere, glimmering with the light of 3 suns. The walls, engraved with stories of conquest and honor, told of victories against enemies both near and far. For many, this place was not simply a palace. It was the heart of the empire itself, a symbol of order and power. And yet, for years, something had been missing. The disappearance of Princess Ilara had left an emptiness no words could fill. She had been the empire's pride, strong, graceful, and destined to rule after her father, Emperor Veyran. She vanished without a trace during a diplomatic voyage 2 decades earlier. Some believed she was taken by raiders. Others whispered she had betrayed the empire and fled. But time passed and her name became more a memory than a hope. So it was on this day, when life in the palace seemed ordinary, that history bent in an unexpected direction. The grand doors at the front of the palace, crafted from star metal and said to be unmovable except by command of the royal bloodline, suddenly creaked. The sound carried through the vast halls, echoing like thunder. Guards turned at once, weapons raised, eyes sharp. Courtiers froze mid-speech, sensing something extraordinary. The doors groaned again, and then, to the disbelief of all who witnessed, they began to open. Slowly, steadily, light poured through the widening gap, casting a long shadow across the polished floor. And there she was. Princess Ilara stepped forward, her figure framed by sunlight. Time had changed her. Yet the noble grace in her step was unmistakable. She was older, her eyes sharper, her hair longer, but there was no doubt. The lost air had returned. Gasps filled the hall. Some dropped to their knees, overwhelmed. Others whispered in fear or suspicion. Could this truly be her? Could the dead return? But then the silence deepened even further. For in her arms she carried something no one expected. A child. He was small, no older than 6 or 7, with curious eyes that scanned the chamber as though it belonged to him. His skin bore the pale tone of humans, and his dark hair was unlike that of the Solarians, whose features usually shimmered faintly with the glow of starlight. Yet there was something in his gaze, something steady, something unyielding, that silenced even the cruelest of whispers. The princess, someone whispered. She lives. Ilara, said Lord Kalen, one of the Emperor's counselors, stepping forward. His voice trembled as though he did not trust the truth of his own eyes. It cannot be. You vanished. You were gone. Ilara held her child closer. Her voice was calm but strong, carrying across the chamber. I was lost, yes, but not gone. And I have returned. This is my son, the hall erupted. Voices rose in shock and outrage. Words like human, betrayal, and unworthy echoed from one side of the court to the other. Some of the younger nobles shouted demands for answers. Others simply stared, unsure whether to rejoice or fear. At last, from the throne itself, Emperor Veyran stood. His tall figure was cloaked in imperial robes, and his face, once marked with sorrow for his daughter's disappearance, was now unreadable. His eyes, sharp as a blade, studied the woman before him. Ilara, he said, his voice carrying the full weight of authority, if you are truly my blood, then you stand where you belong. But tell me, who is this child you bring into my hall? The boy did not hide. He looked directly at the Emperor, unafraid. His expression was steady, his gaze bold, though he said nothing. Ilara lowered her head in respect, but her voice was firm. He is my son. His name is Kyle. His father was a human. Shock struck the court like lightning. Nobles gasped aloud. Several stepped back as though the word itself carried danger. A Solarian royal joined with a human? It was beyond scandal. It was unthinkable. A human? Spat Lord Kalen, his voice sharp with anger. You dare return here with such a child? Humans are weak, fragile. They are not fit to walk these halls, much less carry royal blood. Others murmured in agreement, their voices filled with disdain. Humans were tolerated in the Empire, yes, but only as workers, traders, or explorers. Never as equals, and certainly not as kin to the throne. Ilara raised her chin, her eyes blazing. You speak of weakness, but you know nothing of them. Humans are not what you believe. I lived among them, not as a princess, but as one of their own. They are more than what your pride allows you to see. She placed a hand on her son's shoulder. Kale is proof of this. The Emperor remained silent, though his eyes lingered on the boy. He saw the same thing others did, the human traits, yes, but something more. Something in the way the boy stood tall. unflinching, even under the gaze of those who despised him. "Mother," Kyle whispered softly, tugging at her arm. His voice was clear, childlike but steady. "Why do they look at us this way?" Ilara placed her hand on his hair gently. "Because they do not yet understand." The Emperor's council shifted uneasily. Some urged him to dismiss her, to order guards to seize both mother and child. Others remained quiet, curious of what might unfold. Finally, Emperor Veyran lifted his hand. Silence fell at once. His words came slowly, measured, each syllable a stone placed carefully upon another. "You claim to be Ilara, my daughter, heir to this empire. You return with a child who is half-human, and you ask me to accept him as royal blood. This is no small matter. Proof will be required. Answers must be given." His gaze sharpened. "But one truth cannot be denied. The doors of this palace opened for you. That alone tells me you are of my line. The blood of Solarian does not lie." The court trembled with uncertainty. Ilara met his eyes. "Then let proof come. I did not return to hide or beg. I returned because my place is here, and so is his." The Emperor studied her, then the child. His silence lasted long enough to stir whispers once more. Then at last he turned back to his throne. "This matter will not be settled in a day," he declared. "Let the council gather. Let truth be weighed. Until then, Princess Ilara and her son will remain within the palace. Under watch but unharmed." Gasps rose again, but no one dared defy the Emperor's command. Guards stepped forward, but not with weapons drawn. Instead, they formed a respectful circle, guiding Ilara and her son deeper into the palace. The boy looked back once, his curious eyes scanning the hall filled with nobles and soldiers. For a moment, those who met his gaze felt a chill, not of fear, but of something unknown. Something they could not name. And so, with the palace doors closed once more, a new chapter in the Empire's story began, for the lost princess had returned. And with her, she brought a child who would change everything. The palace, though filled with golden light and the perfume of rare flowers, had become heavy with whispers. The return of Princess Ilara was the only subject on every lip. Courtiers and nobles filled the corridors, speaking in hushed tones, their eyes wide with a mixture of shock and curiosity. But no matter how soft the voices were, the words all carried the same theme: a human-born child in the royal line. The scandal was greater than anything the Empire had faced in living memory. For centuries, the Solarians had considered themselves guardians of order, destined to guide the stars with their unmatched wisdom and strength. To mix their blood with another race, especially humans, creatures often regarded as frail, restless wanderers, was seen as lowering the dignity of the throne. And yet here was Ilara, not ashamed, not afraid, but walking through the palace halls with her son as if daring the Empire to judge her. Ilara and Kale were taken to chambers near the royal wing. They were richly furnished with walls carved from crystal stone that shimmered faintly with the palace's inner light. Servants brought food and clothing, though their eyes lingered with questions they dared not speak aloud. Kyle, though young, noticed the glances. He asked his mother that night, "Why do they look at me like I should not be here?" Ilara sat beside him on the edge of the bed, brushing back his dark hair. "Because they do not yet know you," she said gently. "Fear makes people see shadows where none exist. But you must remember this: your worth is not given by them. It lives inside you." Kyle nodded slowly, though he did not fully understand. His mother's words made him feel strong, but the eyes of strangers still unsettled him. The next day, the Imperial Council gathered in the Hall of Stars. This chamber was the heart of Solarian power. The ceiling, a dome of living crystal, displayed the galaxy above in real time. Beneath it, a great circular table of silver metal reflected the faces of those seated around it. Emperor Veyran presided at the head, his expression unreadable. On one side sat nobles and advisors who had long opposed any break in tradition. On the other were a few who still carried loyalty to Ilara and saw her return as a blessing. When Ilara entered, Kale at her side, the voices swelled like a storm. Lord Kalen was the first to rise. His silver robes shimmered as he spoke with sharp anger. "Your Majesty, this is an insult to the Empire. To bring this child here is to spit upon the purity of our line. How can we allow such weakness to sit beside our throne?" Murmurs of agreement followed him. Lady Arryn, younger and kinder than most, leaned forward with a calmer tone. And yet the palace doors opened for her. No one but the true heir could have done so. That alone proves her blood is still bound to this house. But the child, Kaelin thundered. The child is not Solarian. His father is human. How can such a one inherit even a fraction of our destiny? It is madness to allow it. The Emperor lifted his hand and silence returned. His gaze turned to Alara. Speak. You lived among humans, you bore a son by one. Explain to this council why you bring him here and why he should not be cast aside. Alara stood tall. Her voice carried not anger but conviction. When I was lost, I believed I had been abandoned by fate. But the humans found me. They healed me, sheltered me, and welcomed me not as a stranger but as their own. I lived among them not as a princess but as Alara, a traveler with nothing. I saw their courage, their kindness, and their fire. They are not weak. They endure even when all odds are against them. They are restless, yes, but that restlessness drives them forward when others would surrender. She placed her hand on Kyle's shoulder. This child is proof of what two worlds can create together. He carries the legacy of Solarian in the heart of humanity. He will not weaken this empire, he will strengthen it. Kyle, sensing all eyes upon him, stood straighter. Though he did not speak, his steady gaze met those of the counselors without fear. The debate grew louder. Some argued that tradition could not be broken. Others wondered if prophecy spoke of such a child. Old legends told of a union between races that would bring strength against great enemies. For centuries, those stories were dismissed as myths. Now, the boy's presence gave them new weight. Outside the chamber, the news spread through the capital. Citizens gathered in marketplaces and along shining avenues, repeating the tale of the princess and her child. To some, it was a sign of renewal. To others, it was a threat to the order of the empire. The city itself became a mirror of the council, divided and uncertain. Later that night, Alara stood on the balcony of her chamber looking out over the city lights. Kale joined her, his small hand clutching the railing. They don't like me, he whispered. Alara looked down at him, her heart tightening. Not yet, but one day they will see. You must be patient. Do you think grandfather likes me? Kyle asked, his voice small but honest. Alara hesitated. The Emperor had not shown his feelings, not clearly. His silence was both shield and weapon. He sees you, she said softly. And that is the first step. Kale's eyes turned to the stars above, the same stars displayed in the council hall. I don't feel weak, Mother, he said quietly. I feel different. Like I can hear something inside me when people try to scare me. Like their words don't reach me the way they want. Alara looked at him with surprise. She knew her son had a strength unusual even for Solarian children. She had seen it when storms raged on the human colony, when others trembled but Kale stood firm. She had seen it when he comforted her in her darkest days. Perhaps what he carried was more than simply blood. Perhaps it was destiny. Days passed and the council argued without end. Some demanded exile, others demanded trial. But Emperor Veyron delayed, listening to each side, weighing more than words. He had seen in Kale's eyes something he had not admitted aloud. The boy did not flinch as others did. One evening, the Emperor summoned Alara privately. You defy much, daughter, he said slowly. You return with a human child and ask us to accept him. Do you not understand the weight of what you ask? I do, Alara answered. But I ask because it is right. Kale is not ashamed to me, nor should he be to you. He is our future. The Emperor's gaze lingered on the child who was asleep nearby. His features softened, though his voice remained stern. Perhaps. Or perhaps he is a storm that will break us. Alara did not lower her eyes. Then let the storm come. I would rather face it than live in silence. By the week's end, the council reached no conclusion. But fate, as it often did, chose its own path. A messenger arrived in the palace with grave news. Patrols at the edge of the empire had vanished. Entire outposts lay silent. Rumors spread of shadows moving between stars, of whispers that bent minds until soldiers turned against themselves. The council grew uneasy. The mind weavers, ancient enemies thought defeated, were stirring again. And as this fear spread, many began to remember the old prophecy. A child of two worlds would stand where others fell. The scandal of the princess's return had not ended. But now it was tied to something far greater, the fate of the empire itself. The calm of the Solarian Empire had been broken. In the weeks following Princess Alara's return, rumors had grown like wildfire. reaching even the farthest planets under Solarian rule. Courtiers whispered in the halls of shadowy movements at the edges of the galaxy. Merchants spoke in hushed tones of outposts found abandoned, their alarms still ringing into the emptiness of space. Even the most skeptical scholars began to question old legends that had long been dismissed. For the first time in centuries, fear entered the Empire, not of each other, but of something far greater. The Mindweavers were returning. These creatures, older than many stars themselves, had once threatened to dominate the Solarian Empire. They did not attack with armies or weapons. Instead, they invaded the mind. They bent thoughts, turning allies into enemies, friends into spies. Entire worlds had fallen under their influence in the distant past, leaving nothing but silence and despair. Though the Solarians had believed them defeated, the emptiness at the borders suggested otherwise. Emperor Veyron called a meeting of the Imperial Council, more urgent than any before. Princess Alara attended, Kale at her side. Even the most skeptical members of the council now turned their attention from arguments over bloodlines to the more pressing question: survival. Reports from the outer colonies are disturbing, said General Thalen, a veteran of countless battles. Entire stations have gone silent. Communications are cut. Our scouts speak of shadows moving through space, of ships turning on themselves. The council murmured in fear. Humans might have been considered fragile, but their tales of bravery and resilience now seemed almost prophetic. Ilara, Emperor Veyron spoke, his gaze sharp. Your child is human-born. Do you believe? Is there any hope that he might play a role in facing this threat? Ilara's eyes met Kyle's. The boy had always seemed extraordinary, but now she realized the extent of what might lie within him. Kale has abilities that are different from ours, she said. He thinks in ways we cannot. He sees patterns, predicts outcomes, and resists influence that others cannot. I have watched it for years. Humans, they have strength we rarely understand. Their minds are unpredictable in the best way. They refuse control when control is wrong. Kyle shifted slightly beside her, sensing the weight of the discussion. Though young, he could feel the tension in the room, the fear, the hope, and the weight of expectation. You claim the child can resist the Mindweavers, General Thalen said skeptically. But he is only a boy. How can a child face an enemy that bends entire civilizations to its will? Ilara's gaze was steady. Because that is exactly why. Children see the world without the chains of fear. Their courage is raw. Their minds are open. They will not bend like the rest of us. I do not know what will happen, but I know this: Kale can stand where others fail. The council fell silent. No one spoke, for the first time recognizing that the princess might be right. Meanwhile, Kale walked through the palace gardens. The night sky above glimmered with stars, distant suns lighting the paths below. He touched the petals of alien flowers, still absorbing the beauty of the palace he had just arrived in. Though he was human-born, he had learned quickly to move through the alien environment with grace. He paused and looked to the stars, imagining the shadows moving between them. Somewhere out there were creatures he had never met, with power he could barely comprehend. But inside him a strange calm grew, a sense that he was meant for something greater than himself. Ilara, Kyle asked quietly, what if I am not strong enough? You already are, Ilara replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. Strength is not measured by size or age. It is measured by the courage to stand, even when fear surrounds you. That is what makes you different. That is what makes you powerful. Kyle nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle inside him. He did not yet understand everything that would come, but he felt ready to face it. The next morning, scouts returned with disturbing evidence. On the edge of the Empire, entire fleets had been found empty, drifting silently through space. No battle had been fought, yet all crews were gone. Ships showed signs of manipulation, systems rerouted as though guided by invisible hands. The Mindweavers are here, General Thalen said grimly, and they are stronger than ever. Ilara stood beside him, her eyes calm. We have something they do not expect, she said softly. We have Kale. At first, some laughed at the suggestion. A child, no matter how clever, could not possibly face an enemy that had destroyed entire worlds. But as the reports came in, as they observed the boy resisting strange influences in practice chambers, doubts began to form. Kale could resist mental influence where even veteran soldiers failed. It was not magic nor technology, but something innate. "He is not just a child," whispered Lady Aaron, who had long supported Alara. "He is a spark, and sparks can start fires." The first encounter came sooner than expected. On a distant border station, Mindweaver forces emerged from the void. They moved like shadows, twisting light and thought, attempting to overwhelm the station's inhabitants. Solarian soldiers panicked, their minds bent by whispers. Communication with the capital became strained. Then Kale appeared through a link Alara had opened, an observation network connecting palace chambers with distant outposts. He focused, staring at the streaming data, at the movement of the Mindweaver's influence. Slowly, with surprising clarity, he pointed to patterns others could not see. "Here," he said. "They are vulnerable where the energy lines cross. If you disrupt the nodes, you can break their control." The generals hesitated. Could a child's observation be trusted? The situation was desperate. Following his directions, the soldiers acted, and the nodes were disrupted. The Mindweaver's influence faltered. Panic subsided, and the station remained under Solarian control. News reached the palace quickly. The council could not deny it. Kale's mind had saved lives where strategy alone had failed. Humans, thought to be weak and fragile, had produced something the strongest of Solarians could not. That evening, the council convened once more. Many voices that had been loud in opposition now spoke in cautious respect. Emperor Veyron, seated in his throne, looked down at Kale. "You have done something remarkable," he said. "You have resisted the Mindweavers where others fell. Tell me, boy, how do you understand what they are doing?" Kale looked up, his dark eyes steady. "I see what they want," he said simply. "They try to control fear. They try to change what people think. But I don't let them. I focus on what I know is right. And I don't follow fear." A hush fell over the council. Even hardened generals were moved by the words of a child. Alara stepped forward, proud but calm. "This is what I told you. Humans have strength beyond what you imagine. Kale's courage is not alone. It is the courage of many of those who dare to stand when all seems lost. We cannot ignore it. We must embrace it." The Emperor's expression softened. Though he still bore the weight of centuries and tradition, he knew the truth. This child, this human-born boy, might very well be the key to the Empire's survival. Plans began immediately. Solarian fleets were reorganized to follow Kale's guidance. Soldiers were trained to resist influence through methods Kale helped design. The princess and her son became central figures in the defense strategy. And slowly, the scandal that had divided the Empire began to shift. Respect replaced doubt, and hope began to grow in the hearts of many. Kale, for his part, remained quiet, focused on the task ahead. He studied star maps, fleet movements, and energy patterns. He asked questions, listened carefully, and learned quickly. Though only a child, he carried the calm determination of someone far older. As night fell on the capital, Alara stood once more on her balcony, looking out at the lights of the city. Kale joined her, silent, staring at the stars. "They are coming," he said quietly. "Yes," Alara replied, "but we are ready. And you?" "You are ready," Kale nodded. Though he could not fully understand what awaited him, he felt the truth of her words. The boy born of two worlds was no longer simply a scandal. He was the first spark of hope against a threat older than the stars themselves. And somewhere beyond the reaches of the Empire, in the shadows of space, the Mindweavers stirred, unaware that the child they had dismissed would soon become their greatest challenge. The Solarian Empire was no stranger to battles. For centuries, their fleets had traveled the stars, their warriors and leaders unmatched in skill and strategy. Yet the threat now approaching was unlike any they had faced before. The Mindweavers were clever, invisible, and relentless. No weapon of light or energy could harm them directly. They controlled through fear and thought, and entire fleets had already been lost at the borders. Yet in the palace, hope stirred. Kyle, the human-born child, had proven to be different. Unlike Solarian soldiers and advisors, he resisted the subtle mental influence of the Mindweavers. Where others flinched, he stood firm. Where others doubted, he acted, and the Empire, for the first time in generations, began to see the value of humanity in a way that transcended simple bloodlines. The first real test came when the Mindweavers attacked a mining colony on the edge of the Empire. The colony had no defenses against such enemies, and the inhabitants were panicked. Ships were being guided into dangerous asteroid fields, communications scrambled, and chaos spread like wildfire. Kale was brought in via holographic communication. Though only a child, he observed the colony's status screens with quiet focus. His eyes scanned the data, noting patterns in the Mind Weaver's manipulation of the colony's systems. "They are trying to break the leaders first," he said calmly. "If you remove their control over the command nodes, you will disrupt the influence. Everyone else will regain clarity." The generals hesitated, unsure if they could follow the advice of a child. But desperation left them no choice. Kale's instructions were clear, simple, and precise. Soldiers moved to the nodes as he guided them. Slowly, methodically, the colony's system stabilized. Panic subsided. Lives were saved. "Impossible," muttered General Thalen, his voice quiet but full of awe. "A child." And he knew what we could not see. Alara smiled gently. "I told you," she said. "Humans are different. Their courage and clarity are not always obvious, but they are real. Kale carries it inside him, and it is stronger than fear." The council began to take notice. Those who had doubted him before were now watching closely. Even the Emperor, who valued tradition above all, began to understand. There was something extraordinary in the human mind that Solarians had long overlooked. Kale's influence did not stop at strategy. In the weeks that followed, he inspired the soldiers themselves. Where once fear had caused hesitation, now courage spread. Solarian soldiers who faced the Mind Weavers began to resist, guided by the boy's example. They did not understand fully why they could withstand the subtle mental attacks, but they trusted Kale's calm presence. "It is as if he shields us," whispered one young officer. "We can feel our minds, our thoughts, and they are ours, not theirs." The boy had not only saved lives, but he had taught the Empire a lesson it had never learned. Courage could be contagious. Strength was not only in power or skill, but in the willingness to resist when all odds were against you. Back in the palace, Kyle spent hours studying. He mapped the Mind Weaver's movements across the galaxy, noting patterns that even the most advanced Solarian computers could not detect. Though young, his human intuition allowed him to see solutions that others overlooked. Ilara often watched him in silence. She knew that the boy was growing not only in ability but in confidence. Each small victory against the Mind Weavers made him stronger. Each saved colony added weight to the belief that humans were more than fragile creatures. "You are doing well," she said one evening, standing beside him. "Do you understand why the Empire needs you?" Kale nodded slowly. "Because they are afraid," he said simply. "And I am not afraid." Ilara smiled. "Exactly. Fear is what they use against us. But courage is stronger. Never forget it." He looked up at her with determination. "I won't." The first major battle with the Mind Weavers came at the orbital defense station of Lyrian Prime. It was a massive structure, floating above a blue-green planet, bristling with energy cannons and shield emitters. The Mind Weavers arrived in waves, their influence attempting to turn the station's defenders against one another. Kale was there, connected via the observation network. His small hands moved over the controls, not fighting with weapons but guiding minds. "Focus on the nodes connecting the shields," he said. "If you disrupt their link, they cannot control your thoughts. Keep calm." "Follow me." Soldiers obeyed, following his directions exactly. Slowly, the station system stabilized. The Mind Weavers' attacks began to falter. The enemy was clever, but Kale's guidance gave the defenders clarity. Then something remarkable happened. Soldiers who had been paralyzed with fear suddenly regained their senses. They fought back, not with advanced technology, but with courage, with human determination reflected in their actions. The Solarians had learned from Kale. After the battle, the council gathered again. The palace, once divided by scandal, now echoed with respect. Discussions were no longer only about traditions or bloodlines. They were about survival and leadership. Kale had shown them that strength could be found in unexpected forms, that courage was not exclusive to age or species. Emperor Veyron spoke, his voice carrying the authority of centuries. "This child, human-born though he may be, has saved lives where others would have fallen. He has shown us what we have ignored for far too long. Perhaps it is time to learn from him." The council murmured agreement. Even Lord Kalen, who had opposed Kale's presence the most, bowed his head in recognition of the boy's courage. Kale, despite his small size, continued to be the heart of strategy. His human spirit inspired the Solarians to face the Mindweavers without fear. He taught them methods of resistance not through weapons alone but through willpower and focus. Soldiers practiced calming techniques he devised, learning to resist manipulation by steady thought and concentration. For the first time, humans and Solarians worked side by side, not just in physical defense but in mental resilience. They discovered that courage could spread, that clarity of mind could defeat even the most invisible of enemies. Even the Emperor, standing in the palace halls, realized that the child's influence was reshaping the empire itself. He had not only saved lives, but he had strengthened hearts, uniting an empire through the power of courage. Elara watched her son one evening, sitting beside him on the balcony. The stars shimmered above, distant suns lighting the city below. "They are coming again," Kyle said softly. "More shadows, more attacks." Elara nodded. "I know, but we are ready. You have prepared them. You have prepared me. You have prepared the Empire." Kyle looked up at her, his young face serious. "Do you think I can do it?" "You already are," she said, placing her hand on his small shoulder. "Strength does not come from size or experience. It comes from the heart. You have proven it already, and you will prove it again." Kale smiled slightly, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the spark of determination. He was human-born, yes, but his courage was larger than anyone had imagined. And so the Solarian Empire, once divided and fearful, began to awaken to the truth. Humans were not weak. They were resilient, inventive, and brave. They carried something ancient and powerful, something that could not be controlled, bent, or broken. The Mindweavers, for all their cunning, had not yet faced a force like this. A child, human-born, standing unafraid in the heart of an empire, guiding minds, inspiring courage, and uniting species. The war was far from over. But hope, once distant and fragile, now burned brightly in the hearts of those who followed Kale. And in the darkness beyond the stars, the Mindweavers would soon discover that the human spirit was not something to be underestimated. The Solarian Empire had survived the first wave of the Mindweavers' attack. Entire fleets had fallen at the edges of the galaxy, but thanks to Kyle, the human-born child, the core of the Empire remained intact. The boy's courage, clarity, and unique human perspective had saved lives where experience alone had failed. Now, with every passing day, the Empire learned to stand against fear and deception, guided by a small, determined figure who had changed everything. The palace was quiet that morning, the sun spilling golden light across the marble floors. Princess Elara walked beside Kale, their hands brushing occasionally. The boy's eyes were already scanning reports from the front lines. Though he was still young, he had grown taller in presence. There was a quiet confidence about him, a strength that could not be taught, only awakened. "Do you think it's over?" Kyle asked, glancing at the sky. Elara shook her head. "No, but it is not the end either. Every battle teaches us something. Every victory, however small, shows us what we are capable of." Kyle nodded, absorbing the words. The Empire had survived its first true test, and yet the war with the Mindweavers was far from finished. Outside the palace, fleets were moving once more. Soldiers, trained by Kale's guidance, now understood the subtle art of resisting mental influence. They communicated without fear, coordinated with clarity, and approached every operation with courage. Even the older generals, once skeptical of a human child leading them, now followed his instructions with complete trust. The first major coordinated strike was planned for the edge of the Andrenis cluster. Mindweaver scouts had been spotted there, attempting to infiltrate the colony networks. It was a dangerous mission. Many feared it might be a trap, but Kale had studied the enemy's movements, tracing their patterns across light years of space. His strategy was simple yet brilliant. Disrupt the nodes that channeled the Mindweaver's influence, then strike swiftly to reclaim control of the colonies. Elara watched him as he gave his instructions to the generals via holographic link. His voice was calm, precise, yet carried authority far beyond his years. Every movement, every word inspired confidence. "Remember," Kyle said quietly, "fear is their tool. Trust yourselves, trust each other, and trust that courage will guide you." The strike began at dawn. Solarian fleets moved through space like a silver tide, their weapons ready, but their greatest strength now lay in minds united, not just ships armed with energy. Kale's instructions flowed through the command network, guiding soldiers and officers alike. At first, the Mindweavers tried to confuse them, sending whispers and illusions into the minds of the fleet. Some hesitated, their thoughts faltering, but Kale's guidance acted like a shield. "Focus," he said, his words flowing through the network. "See what is real. Let your courage be your guide." And they did. The nodes were disrupted, minds that had been enslaved by invisible threads now cleared. Ships that had been set on collision courses with asteroids regained control. The Mindweavers' strategy failed, not because of brute force, but because courage and determination could not be controlled. When the battle was over, the Andranus cluster was saved. Colonies that had once been lost or nearly destroyed were intact. Ships returned home, soldiers exhausted but victorious. The Empire had survived, and for the first time, humans and Solarians alike realized the power of courage combined with strategy and heart. The news traveled quickly. Across the Empire, citizens celebrated not only the victory, but the boy who had guided them. Kale, who had once been viewed as a scandal, was now seen as a symbol of hope. Children drew his likeness in the streets. Soldiers spoke of his wisdom. And the Emperor, standing in his throne room, recognized the truth that many had long ignored. Emperor Veyron called a council gathering, one unlike any before. Every member, even those who had opposed Kale's presence, attended. The room was filled with anticipation. "Princess Ilara," he said, his voice strong, "you have returned not only with your child, but with a gift the Empire did not know it needed. Kale has shown us that strength is not only in tradition or power. It is in courage, in clarity, in the heart. He has united us when we might have fallen." Ilara bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, he is more than my son. He is the example of what can be achieved when two worlds come together. Humans have qualities we never understood, and Kale has shown them to us." The Emperor looked at Kale, who stood quietly beside his mother. The boy met the Emperor's gaze without fear. There was no arrogance, only calm determination. The court could feel it, the energy of a leader, not by age, but by spirit. "Kyle," the Emperor said, "you have earned the respect of this empire. Your courage and wisdom have saved lives, and in doing so you have changed us. You have shown us that the future is not bound by old rules alone. What do you wish for this empire?" Kale paused. His mind raced through the events he had witnessed, the lives he had saved, the hope he had inspired. "I wish," he said finally, "for people to trust each other, for humans and Solarians to stand together, for the Empire to be strong not because it fears enemies, but because it believes in courage, in kindness, and in hope." A silence followed. Then slowly the council erupted in applause. Even those who had opposed him before could not deny the truth. The boy's words carried the weight of experience beyond his years. The palace doors, which had once been a symbol of scandal, now became a symbol of unity. Citizens came to see Kale and Princess Ilara, to celebrate the courage that had saved them. Where there had been fear, now there was hope. Where there had been doubt, now there was trust. Kale continued to guide the Empire not as a ruler yet, but as a beacon of what was possible. His strategies against the Mindweavers became legendary. Colonies and fleets flourished under his advice. Soldiers learned to resist fear and deception, inspired by the human spirit he embodied. Ilara watched proudly as her son grew not only in skill but in character. He had shown the Empire that being human was not a weakness. It was a source of strength, resilience, and creativity that could change the fate of worlds. Months passed, and the Mindweavers, though still a threat, had been driven back. The outer colonies regained stability, and the Empire's defenses were stronger than ever. Kale's influence had transformed not only strategy, but the culture of the Solarian Empire. Humans were no longer seen as outsiders. Their courage, adaptability, and spirit had earned respect. The Emperor finally addressed the palace, declaring a day of celebration. "Today," he said, "we honor the bravery of a child born of two worlds who has taught us the greatest lesson of all, that courage is not limited by age, race, or tradition. It is a choice, and when chosen, it can change the stars themselves." The crowd cheered, their voices echoing through the halls. Kale, standing beside Ilara, smiled quietly. He had not sought praise or glory. He had acted because it was right. And yet the Empire had learned the truth that humans, with their courage and heart, were not merely survivors, but leaders and guardians of hope. As the celebration continued, Kale looked out at the stars. He knew the Mindweavers might return, as threats never truly vanished. But he also knew something stronger. The human spirit, combined with Solarian wisdom, could face any challenge. He did not stand alone. The Empire, once divided, now stood united. Humans and Solarians together, hearts aligned, minds focused, courage unshaken. Alara placed a hand on his shoulder. "The future is yours, Kale," she said softly, "and it is bright." Kale looked at her and then at the horizon where the suns of the capital gleamed. "We will make it brighter," he replied, "together." And in that moment, the Solarian Empire understood a simple, enduring truth. The future was not dictated by bloodlines alone, but by courage, heart, and the human spirit. The boy born of two worlds had not only survived, he had changed the galaxy. The palace, the city, and the stars beyond all seemed to shine a little brighter that day. For the lost princess had returned, and with her, she had brought a child who had taught the universe what humans could truly achieve. The doors of the palace, once a symbol of scandal, now stood open as a gateway to a new era, an era where courage, unity, and hope forged the path to the stars.